WFSU-FM now presents a delayed broadcast of the Economic Club of Florida luncheon meeting of April 19, 2013. This program was recorded at the Tallahassee Leon County Civic Center. To introduce the meeting's guest speaker, here's Club Secretary John Arl.
Well, as you know, our speaker today is Dr. Charles Reed, known to many of you here who are his old friends as Charlie Reed. Because of his very distinguished and enormously successful career in Florida before he left us for a sojourn in California. He's had great success in his life, both in government and in education, particularly higher education. He received his undergraduate and doctor's degrees from George Washington University, and then he found his way to Florida, where he served and where I first knew him as the principal education advisor to Governor Graham, and because of his competence and integrity, he ended up as a chief of staff for Governor Graham. He went on from that position to serve for 13 years as a chancellor of the Florida State University system, as I think everybody here knows and many of you recall. And then in 1998, he was called to California to take the job as chancellor of the, and list of these numbers, the 23 campus California State University system. It's the country's largest system of higher education. Nearly 450,000 students, 45,000 faculty. Now, I've worked a little bit with the university system, and working with faculty is just incredibly complex. That's a nice word for it. And just to think of that job. So for 15 years, he did this fantastic job in California. He worked with 4 different governors, from Gray Davis to Arnold Schwarzenegger to Jerry Brown. Think of that. Anyway, Charlie has recently retired, and he's returned to Florida and Tallahassee, and we're very, very happy to have him back. Last year, the American Council of Higher Education awarded Dr. Reed the Theodore M. Hesburgh Award for Leadership Excellence, and I'm advised that that is about the most prestigious award someone in Charlie's field can receive. He is a leader. He knows what he's talking about, and we're very, very happy to have him here and look forward to his comments.
Thank you, John. I had not been back very long to Tallahassee. And incidentally, I want to thank all of you for your welcome back. People in Tallahassee and Florida have been so warm and so welcoming to Kathy and I, and that's one of the reasons that we wanted to come back to Tallahassee and make this our home. So thank you all for that. I hadn't been here but just a couple of weeks, and John Arell called me up. And he said, Charlie, he said, since you've been in California for 15 years, he said, I'm sure you believe in free speech. And I said, sure do. He goes, well, I'd like for you to give one. Now, I said, about what? And he said, about economics. I said, well, you know, how much do I know about economics? And I said, will, you know, Sandy Dallenberg be there? And he said, sure. I said, well, he can be my backup. He knows everything there is to know about everything. But again, you know, I'm honored to be here and to be with Wayne Mixon. As John said, one of my greatest privileges was to work with Bob Graham, who was the 38th governor of Florida. Wayne Mixon was the 39th governor of Florida. But the two of them were one fantastic team when you talk about economics. And I don't think anybody has outdone this in the last 25 years. But Bob Graham asked Wayne Mixon if he would be responsible essentially for economic development in Florida, and if he would go to the Department of Commerce and be responsible to work together with Bob and others and a team to revitalize Florida's economy. As I said, it was a great privilege during that time because there were several Southern governors who got together. Jim Hunt in North Carolina, Chuck Robb in Virginia, White in Texas, Lamar Alexander in Tennessee, Dick Riley in South Carolina. And these Southern governors got together and said, we have to do something economically about the South. And the South had gone on and on and on and had lagged economically the rest of the country. So Wayne joined Bob in that effort. And I'm here to tell you that during their time working together as a team, they created 1,250,000 jobs in Florida. Never before had that been done. But what Wayne and Bob Graham were even more proud of is during that time they worked with the other governors in the South, but Florida led, and what happened was the per capita income exceeded the national average for the first time ever in Florida's history. And that was a goal that they had set, Wayne and Bob. Now, I looked the other day, Florida has kind of slipped back. It's about 97th percentile now instead of over 100. But Florida passed the national average for the first time during their leadership. So Wayne, thank you. Wayne was, saying, when's the last time you spoke to the Economics Club? Well, Bob Graham couldn't get back to Tallahassee one day because of the fog or something. So they called and said, Charlie, you're up at noon. And Wayne said, yeah, that's the way my life was too. He called me one morning and said, you need to give a speech in Dallas this afternoon. But they worked as a team. John shared this. I have been privileged for the last 15 years to be in California. Now, that is a wonderful state. I mean, a lot of people talk about all the nuts and fruits and everything that goes with it. But it's a wonderful place. And it's the most diverse place in the United States in many, many ways. There are 3 systems of higher education in California. The University of California has 10 institutions and about 180,000 students. But they are all research-driven institutions. Berkeley, UCLA, San Diego, Davis, that you're familiar with. And then they have a state system which had the 23 institutions which I headed. We had 450,000 students. As John said, we had 47,000 employees. Now only 23,000 of them were faculty members, but that's enough. But of the 47,000, 45,000 were represented by labor unions. You talk about a headache. I had a headache. But we had the 23 campuses which stretched in the far north, Humboldt State, which was about 80 miles from the Oregon border, all the way to San Diego State, which was on the Mexican border. And the 23 institutions, and we had 7 branch campuses. We had an operating budget of about $8 billion, give or take, depending on whether the legislature was taking or not. And we had a construction budget of about $2 billion. So we had lots of stuff going on every day. Now, John asked me, what are the big differences between Florida as a state and California as a state? Well, culturally, in California, there is a one-to-one connection. Higher education and economic development are tied together at the hip in California. There was a chancellor of the University of California that wrote what's called the Master Plan. And the Master Plan was written right after the war, World War II, to make California's economy grow. Now, I love working for Arnold. He used to call me Charlie. Yeah. California's economy was the 7th largest economy in the world. And of course, Arnold would always say, I need to go to the G7 meeting. And he really thought he should be there. Anyhow, but the cultural difference was the people in California realized that their future, their economic future, their well-being is tied to the well-being of the university system. And that the Silicon Valley wouldn't be there if it wasn't for San Jose State and Stanford. The biotech industry wouldn't be there if it wasn't for UC, San Diego State. The movie industry wouldn't be there. And so they make all those connections. Some of my best supporters in California and in Florida were in the ag industry, and we were talking about that briefly. California produces more than 50% of all the food in America comes from one place. And if you go to Publix and you kind of peel back and you look at the lettuce and the celery and the broccoli, it comes from the Salinas Valley. The largest milk producers in the United States, the largest egg producers, cattle, are all produced in California. And so Clark Kerr wrote this master plan because he saw this university's systems drive the economy and produce creative, smart people. And so everybody, taxi cab drivers, people who work in hotels, realize that their jobs wouldn't be there if it wasn't for this university that's in the neighborhood or in the region. Now, we had 450,000 students, and the community colleges, and I just met the president of Tallahassee Community College. The community colleges in California have 2.5 million students. There are 114 community colleges. And there's a transfer process where they can transfer. That's the easiest way to get into Berkeley or UCLA, is to go to a community college and transfer. But they realize what their role is. But the other thing, other than this cultural difference, is scale. Everything in California is about more than twice what it is any place else in the country. So if I looked at just the California State University system that I was responsible for, it was more than 2 times larger than the Florida university system. If I think back, I became chancellor in Florida in 1985, 86. And tell you the truth, I didn't know what the hell I was supposed to do. So I said, if I'm going to be chancellor, I need to find out. I'd never been the chair of a department or a dean or vice president. Just the next day I woke up and I was chancellor. So I decided that the closest chancellor to Tallahassee was the chancellor of the Georgia system. Now, I hope I don't hurt anybody's feeling in here that graduated from the University of Georgia, but anyhow. I called up the chancellor of the University of Georgia system and said, can I come up to Atlanta and talk to you about what I'm supposed to do? And he said, sure, welcome, Charlie, come on up. So I went up there in August, and he said, this is a real good time. He said, as a matter of fact, he said, this is the most important time of all for chancellors. I said, well, what do you mean? And he says, well, let me explain something to you. He says, this just happened. He said, over at the University of Georgia, he said, Bill Dooley is our football coach. Summer school had just ended. And he said he had several of his players going to summer school. And he said he had a big tackle from down in South Georgia. His name was Bubba. And he said Bubba weighed about 325 and was from Cairo. And he said Bubba took history this summer. And he said Bubba took his final exam and he didn't pass. And he said Coach Dooley sent the assistant coach to find the professor to see what they could do about Bubba's grade. And this professor had standards. And so they talked about it. And so the professor said, well, you know what? He said, I'll retest Bubba. He said, we can do it right here. And he said, I'll just ask him one question. And he said, if he gets it, he says, I'll change his grade to a C. And he said, we can go on. And so the assistant coach thought that sounded pretty good. So he brought Bubba in and sat him down. And the professor said to Bubba, he said, who tore down the walls of Jericho? And he reached back and scratched his head and he said, I don't know, but I didn't do it. Well, the professor wouldn't change his grade. So they appealed this to the president of the University of Georgia. And they went to the president's office and, had some niceties. And the president said, now, what are we here for? And they explained. And the professor said, I just asked Bubba who tore down the walls of Jericho. And with that, the president of the University of Georgia said, look, I have known Bubba and Bubba's family all my life. I know he'd never do anything like that. Well, the professor still would not change the grade. So they went to Atlanta, and they got in the chancellor's office and again kind of went through the same rigmarole. And the chancellor finally said, well, what, to the professor, what was it? And he said, I just asked Bubba who tore down the walls of Jericho. And with that, the chancellor said, look, the University of Georgia Foundation will pay for all the damages. So that was my introduction of what do chancellors do. In California, the California State University produces the highest number of teachers in the United States. As a matter of fact, California State University produces about 15% of all the teachers in America. We produce about 65% of all the teachers in California. So I would visit schools and ask how we were doing, and I would move around, and I'd learn something every time I went out there. But After visiting some schools, middle schools and elementary schools, I came back to the office, and a few days later, I got a letter from a 5th grader from a poor area of California, the Coachella Valley, kind of down south and east of Los Angeles. And let me read to you what she wrote. She said, I'm in the 5th grade in the Coachella Valley, and my class wants you to come and speak. We can pay a small amount of travel expenses. The Coachella Valley is about 75 miles away. Chancellor, we really want you to come. But if you can't, please send Mrs. Reed. And if she can't come, please send President Obama. Now, I like that young woman's sense of protocol, and I accepted, and I made sure that I took Mrs. Reed with me to the Coachella Valley. That's a true story. I shared this with my friends up here. Leading these higher education institutions in America is getting harder and harder. And I like to use the analogy that an avalanche is coming at higher education. And it's coming at almost all of higher education, maybe not Harvard or Yale or Princeton. Those places will kind of be there forever. But all these other state schools, private schools, regional institutions are facing this big avalanche. And as you know, if an avalanche is coming, you better get the hell out of the way or do something. Now, when I say that, the reason that I say that is the economic forces of technology is changing higher education rapidly. There's a transformation going on. And it's the same thing that happened to the newspaper industry, to the media, to the communications people. Who would have thought 10 years ago that you would be picking up your cell phone and paying bills or, you know, depositing a check off your cell phone? These students that are coming to these institutions have a completely different expectation of how they're going to be educated. In the last decade, the banking and the finance industry have had hard lessons to learn because they were being transformed and didn't know it. The competition between higher education institutions is fierce. Now, it's economic competition, but it's competition in every other way. How many of you have heard of MOOCs? M-O-O-Cs. And that's massive, open, online courses. And these are courses that are taught over the internet. But you can pull them up on your cell phone. You can look at them anytime, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. But these courses are being taught by the very best faculty members in the world. And just as I was leaving in December, the California State University entered into 2 big agreements with MOOCs. Udacity to teach algebra, chemistry at the California State University, and edX. So we could get the absolute best faculty members in the world, a biologist from MIT, a professor that taught artificial intelligence from Stanford. He had 60,000 students in his class that he could manage. And it is world class. Now here's something that I want all of you to write down. And when you go home, I want you to Google this, because I want you to get your children or your grandchildren hooked on this. And that's called the Khan Academy, K-A-H-N. Salman Khan is from the Silicon Valley. And here's a guy that wanted to help his two nieces get into Harvard because they wanted to become medical students. And so he was in the Silicon Valley, and he started out putting together math, physics, chemistry classes online. I mean, I went back and took the algebra class just to satisfy myself. But he has now produced hundreds of classes. Bill Gates has given him millions and millions of dollars to produce as many classes as he can. But it is simple, it is helpful, and they come back and tell you what you've done wrong and then lead you in the right direction. But every kid in America ought to sign on to the Khan Academy. It's free, and it'll make them much, much better students. So I guess what I'm saying is, for university leaders, presidents, and chancellors, study as she goes is doomed to fail. The lecture is no longer needed. Let me just say the use of technology is there. Knowledge is ubiquitous now. You can go online and get any amount of knowledge that you want. It's the faculty members that bring life to that knowledge is what the competition is really going to be. Now, as John said, it might be easier to change the course of history than a history course in a university, but that is what is coming. In California, I put together about a dozen business leader groups. The ag industry, the movie television industry, the aerospace industry, the biotechnology industry. And the reason that I wanted to put them together and meet with them was to just ask them, how are we doing? San Jose State and San Luis Obispo produce the largest number of engineers in the Silicon Valley. So I wanted to say, how are we doing? What do you expect of your university? What's the future of your business, and what do you need? Now, it was very interesting to me that after I had made one round of talking to all these business leaders, it turned out that they all wanted the same thing. Whether they were in the ag industry and the milk producing business, or they were in the television movie industry, or they were in the biotechnology, pharmacy, or they were in the IT communications business, they all came back and said, economically, here's where we're going. Here's what we need. So what's that? One, well-educated students. Now, the arts and sciences are very important. But they said, we need people that are willing to learn and relearn throughout their careers. Two, communications. And you always hear that, and I expected to write down writing, which I did, but then they came right back and said, no, not just writing communications, but speaking and making presentations. Do you know how many presentations our company makes every day, all over the world? So you've got to make presentations with this technology that we have. We want people who can analyze and solve problems. We want employees who can work together in teams. Now, one man said to me, At the university, you call that cheating. But our business department, our accounting department needs to work with our marketing department. So we need people who can learn to work together and work together as teams. We need graduates who can use and fix technology. And so that came from one of the milk producers. They said, you know what? We don't milk cows anymore. Robots milk cows. And if you can't fix technology on the fly, you're not very good to us. And then when you think about the movie industry and then you think about the IT industry, so, you know, you need to teach these students how to fix this technology on the fly. We expect you to produce graduates that can speak more than one language. We just don't sell stuff in California. We sell stuff all over the world. And if your graduates can speak more than one language, then we're going to look for them and they'll do well. We need graduates who can think globally and internationally. We want graduates who are innovation ready, who can add value to our company. Now, again, as I said, universities cannot stand still. There is no option. This transformation is going on. The other thing that they said was, we think you ought to do more learning by doing than you do. And if you can produce graduates who know how to work the first day that they come aboard our company, they are much more valuable to us. Now, I watch a little television and I was listening to the President of the Senate and the Speaker of the House talk about students graduating and knowing how to go to work the next day. The other thing that is happening in higher education is there's going to be this big break of the link between cost and quality, because parents and students are going to be asking about the return on investment. When you look at America and you see more than $1 trillion of debt that students and parents have built up and have to pay back, there's big questions now about the return on investment and whether it's worth $50,000, $60,000 a year to attend some of these institutions versus $5,000 or $6,000 to attend an institution. But what they're really looking for are employees that are innovation ready, and they want employees who can invent other jobs. Now, the economic benefits to individuals and to society, I think you all know, but let me just share a little bit of that. Knowledge-based services and high technology production have transformed the United States economy. A well-educated workforce becomes the most valuable asset that these companies have. One, if you're a high school graduate today, you will earn about $1 million, give or take, over your lifetime. But if you are a college graduate and have a baccalaureate degree or a master's degree, you're going to earn $3 million or more. Who do you want out there in society paying taxes? Now, the other thing, we have just gone through and still are coming out of a recession. But during this recession, when you look at unemployment, the unemployment numbers of those who do not have a college degree are 3 to 4 times higher than those that have a college degree. So if you have a college degree, your chances of having a job are so much better than if you don't. A think tank in California, the Milken Institute, just produced a report that said adding 1 year to the average years of schooling among employed people in a metropolitan area results in an increase of real GDP per capita of more than 10%, and an increase in real wages per worker of more than 8%. Add 1 year of college to a region's workforce, and a region's GDP per capita goes up 17.4%. We all know that beyond the dollar benefits, there are intangible benefits to society. Building human capital. The race in the world is who has the best human capital. That's just the way it is. And that race is against China, Brazil, Russia, and these other countries. Discovering and creating new knowledge and thinking about it that way. Preserving knowledge for future generations. Applying knowledge to improve the quality of life in the communities. Now, the intangible, real intangibles. If you have a baccalaureate degree or higher, you will have better health. You will practice better child rearing practices. You will have better nutrition. You will commit less crime. Your schools and neighborhoods will be better, and you'll pay more taxes. I always liked that. Now, in California, for every dollar that the state of California invested in the California State University, it generated over $6 for California, for every $1 invested. When you looked at enhanced earnings by California State University graduates, and you took all that into account, the annual return rises to $23 for every dollar invested. California State University related spending generated more than $17 billion in the state. And the economic impact was more than 150,000 jobs were supported by the California State University. At the University of California, for every $1 in those research institutions that the state invested, they returned $15 in overall economic impact. Florida's state and community colleges contribute today more than $26 billion to the state's economy. They do that each year, yielding a 9.4% rate of return in Florida on the investment. Now, I did see the other day where one of the governor's priorities, I kind of have to say this, was to give a tax break, Dominic won't like this, to businesses of $150 million. Do you think those businesses are going to miss that $150 million business income tax? If you took that $150 million, almost 10% would be rate of return on that $150 million for these universities, and what it can do from an economic development standpoint for the state of Florida. The net income generated by the Florida system by out-of-state students alone contributes $1.4 billion to Florida's economy. Now, that's important. I have two pet peeves that I just need to share with you. One is the amount of money that is wasted, and I'm telling you, wasted on prisons. And the cost to operate these prisons is nothing more than investing in failure. And if you look, 70% of the people have addiction problems. More than 70% don't even have an 8th grade education. And if we would have done better someplace else, we wouldn't have those problems. But I used to be kind of the lead target in California about how much money California spent economically on prisons. Now, here is one figure that they couldn't, get away from. In California, there are 12,000 women in prison for writing bad checks. Now, isn't there another way of, solving that problem than spending $60,000 a year on 12,000 individuals? They used to hate me coming to Sacramento, but the LA Times and the San Francisco Chronicle loved it when I wrote those stories. Now, the other pet peeve is mostly here in Florida. And that's something that, since I left, has ballooned, and now it's shrinking back. But it's called Bright Futures. Now, that is just morally wrong, that you give financial aid, gift, to young people who don't need it, whose parents can afford to pay the tuition in Florida. The tuition in Florida is $5,800 a year. Now, just as I was leaving, I had an orthopedic surgeon come up to me in Miami, say, "Charlie, this Bright Futures program is the best thing I've ever seen." He said, "My twin daughters are going to the University of Florida for nothing." Well, the big beneficiary of Bright Futures are the car dealers, because if you go around these campuses, you see, these exotic cars parked all around the campuses. That is wrong. Now, I think this coming legislature that's there now is going to shrink this down, as they should. Let me tell you, there is no merit aid in California other than what the institutions generate from gifts themselves. All of the aid in California is need-based. And if you are a student and you come from a family in California, whether you're going to the University of California or the California State University, and your family makes $70,000 or less, you do not pay any tuition at all to attend the university. So, the beneficiary are the most needy students of color that attend based on need-based financial aid. Now, let me just say this. This avalanche that's coming, it includes about 70% of the future enrollment in American higher education are going to be students of color and needy students. And we need to figure out how we are going to accommodate those students. These past 5 years have been painful all around the United States. I think every state except Wyoming and North Dakota, and everybody knows that they got something that smells like gas and oil and coal. But those two states are the only two states in the United States that have not cut their budgets. So reversing these trends, I'm not proud of this. I raised tuition in California from 2000 to 2013 by $4,000 per student. Now, the legislature knew I was going to do that, so they cut the budget, but they knew that we would replace that money so that we could continue to accommodate and provide access to the students that wanted to come to a university. And my colleague at the University of California did the same thing. But reversing these trends and reinvesting in higher education should be a high priority for all state policymakers. Investing in higher education to keep tuition low and quality high at public universities and drive the economy. Our challenge then is to give our young people the best education possible. And I want to say this, the best thing, the single best thing a state can do is to provide access to that higher education and to keep the pressure on these institutions from an accountability standpoint to have these students graduate. And that is a major issue, is to make sure that the students that you admit graduate. And that means that you've got to help these students all along the way. The 21st century will be a world of innovators, mavericks, and leaders who will constantly jump boundaries to create new things. And I can see a major change. It's already occurring. In the past 25 years, we've invested mostly in physics. That's where the communications and the IT have come from. We're going to be investing in biology, biotechnology, because America has to solve health problems, cancer, Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, and that is possible if we invest the same way we did in technology for IT. We'll solve those problems. The other thing living on the West Coast kind of wakes you up to is we need to do as much work and study as we can about China. When you are as big an economy and have that number of people, we need to make sure that we are prepared to deal with a country like that. As you all know, higher education is a powerful incubator for economic development. The cuts over the last 5 years have threatened economic stability in this country. And after years of disinvestment, our states need to reinvest, and they need to reinvest over a long period of time. I want to end on good news. It appears that the governor and the legislature in Florida are going to reinvest in Florida's higher education system. The House budget contains an 8% increase in operating funds for higher education, and the Senate budget contains 7%. Those are worthy investments in the future of Florida, so I think good things are going to happen.
Thank you, Charlie, and excuse me. Most of all, thank you for your long-standing great service to the people of Florida and exporting some of that over to California to have fewer fruits and nuts. I did want to share with you, we saw the big waste you talked about in the correction system. So about 4 years ago, we saw an event to close a budget hole to actually bond construction of 3 new prisons. That incensed us at Tax Watch. We looked at it and said, follow the evidence. We stopped that. They found out they were going to build not 3, but 22. So that's $2.2 billion. Annual operating costs, $840 million. Total waste would have been. We helped change it and transform that. We're really pleased about it to put now more of this money in K-12, higher ed, and the like. As part of our moving from dumb justice to smart justice, and Sandy, D'Alembert, and others were an important part of the Tax Watch Center for Smart Justice then. The real question, though, is an angel asked me to ask you this, and I think it's a good question. How is California's pre-K to 12 preparing students for the colleges and university system in California? And what can we learn here in Florida to make that a more successful transition?
They're not doing very well. Now, California probably has the biggest challenge in the world in preparing K through 12 students. 68% of all of the students in K through 12 in California are Latinos. 68%. And so they have this huge problem of language. And so they have English language learners in every school in California, which gives them huge challenges. Now, one of the things that we have done in California is the California State University We pay for and test every 11th grader in math and in English, and that's the university system. And we're able to tell those students and tell those parents that they're ready for college or they're not ready for college. And if you're not ready for college, then do something about it in the 12th grade. Take algebra again, take geometry, take a writing class, take a reading comprehensive class, but do it in the 12th grade so that you are ready. Now, we've seen phenomenal increases in math scores. More than 60% of the students in California are algebra ready. Still, only about 23% of the students are ready in English, and that's because of the English language learners. So that's the challenge that they have.
Dr. Reed, thank you for your service. When you compare California, Texas, and Florida, the size of their economy, size of the population, what do you see as the single greatest opportunity for higher education in Florida, since you've got unique perspective?
The biggest opportunity for Florida is to produce creative people that can and be available for companies, corporations that want to move their headquarters here. Florida is attractive because of the tax situation. California, everybody, goes there and stays there. It's a myth that people leave California because of taxes. The taxes in California, they couldn't be any higher, okay? But, because of the universities, those companies want to stay there. I mean, in the Silicon Valley, they are looking for creative people every day. So, that's what Florida can do and attract businesses to come here, and then they can have work-ready employees that can help that company be successful.
Hi, and welcome back to Tallahassee. Your unique perspective of being a chancellor in Florida and in California, can you kind of give us your thoughts on how things are organized now for the upper levels of education in Florida versus the way it was when you had the job here? What unique challenges or strengths exist currently?
That's not a fair question to me.
Wasn't meant to be.
The only thing that I can say to you is the best higher education in America, North Carolina, Wisconsin, California, Texas, I could go, are organized centrally and are governed by a governing board. And that governing board has a unique plan. And in California, it's called the master plan. And what you don't have in Wisconsin or California is you don't have this competition between these institutions. And what you make decisions about is what is best for Florida. Now, if you are a president, like Stan Marshall or Sandy, you're going to make a decision about what is best for the property down the street here, not necessarily what is best for the state. And that is the difference that I see. And those states that have the best systems are governed by a board that has a plan, and that they look out for what is best for the entire state. Now, I'll get slammed for saying that, but I believe it, I have lived it, and I have watched the other states and what they have been able to accomplish.
Welcome home, Charlie. Charlie, I have a question. Since our state and California now, since we're getting out of the Great Recession, we're likely to see some population growth again in Florida, not as much as we had back in the 80s when we were in the Graham administration, but with that population growth, assumably there'll be a higher demand for community colleges and higher education. What do you see as the budget capacities to support universities, maybe in California and in Florida, to absorb the type of demand for higher ed, since we know you have to have enough money to have a incoming freshman class or a sophomore or junior class, you have to have money to accommodate them. Is that an issue, and are there any resolutions if it is?
Yeah, the revolution is technology. And so there's plenty of space and plenty of room in every state on every campus. But we're going to have to use the facilities in different ways. We're going to have to ask students to take classes online. If you think about it, if you come to a campus 4 days a week, if you only come 2, then you opened up space for, the other 2. So the use of technology is going to provide the access and the capacity that higher education needs.
Thank you, sir. We're going to take just one more question. I have a hand over here who's been first. Sorry.
Thank you, Dr. Reed. What do you think of this FCAT system that's in place in Florida?
I don't know enough about it.
Oh, no.
The only thing, I guess that I know is you have to figure out a way to know where you are. And if you assess students and what they've learned, and if it provides them good information and feedback so that they can learn more or make up what they missed, it's not bad. In the United States right now, there's something called Common Core standards, and every state except Texas has adopted Common Core standards. And they are standards that are much higher than what has been in the past. And they're going to ask K through 12 students to meet these Common Core standards. And they're going to be able to assess them on an annual basis and do whatever they can to make sure that those students meet those standards and stay on track. And I don't think that that is a bad thing. I think that is a good thing. One of the biggest challenges for higher education are students who come who are not prepared in English or math to do college-level work. And so they have to spend the first year making up what they don't have when they arrived. So, making it up in the 12th grade is a lot better than making it up on a college campus.
Well, we've about run out of time here, so thank you very much, Dr. Reed, for a most entertaining program. Don't go away.
You've been listening to a delayed broadcast of the Economic Club of Florida luncheon meeting. This program recorded April 19th, 2013 at the Tallahassee Leon County Civic Center. Listen again next time for another meeting of the Economic Club of Florida on WFSU-FM.